Welcome to the Humple Hut. Welcome back to the Humple Hut. My name is Five Potatoes, and I hope you enjoyed that intro. It might shock you, but I did make that intro all by myself. That is my take on Humple Dumple. I ended up making him from a potato. Please don't tell my wife. We might have been one potato short for dinner the other day. But I hope you enjoyed that intro. So for this video, I wanted to cover some guidelines on how to make a deck. It can be tough trying to determine where to start. So these are some just rough, I wouldn't say rules, but just good tips to follow when creating a first deck. I've made plenty of decks that do not follow a number of these guidelines, but it's a good starting place. So let's first cover the four main components of a MetaZoo game. You'll need a caster, select a caster, cards comprising of your aura deck, 2 starting tarot cards, and your deck itself. So I want to cover a couple quick things for this. Your caster. The main color of your caster represents the primary aura type. In this case, Caitlin is blue. That represents the water aura type. I recommend the vast majority of the cards in your deck be comprised of your primary aura type. Some casters, or I should say most casters, contain a secondary aura that can be selected. The entire deck can comprise of just your primary aura type, or you may select one, if there are multiple, only one of your secondary aura. In my case, Caitlin has Earth and Lightning. I selected Earth for my secondary aura type. The aura deck comprises of just your primary aura. So in this case, I have 10 water aura cards. And if you selected a secondary aura to play with, you will need a couple of aura cards representing that secondary aura, in my case, Earth. Typically recommend 2 to 5, but these cards will be played within the game in order to play those types of cards. Moving to the starting Terra. This comprises of 2 different starting tarot cards. They have to be different, and they have to contain the keyword starter in it. If you just choose to use your primary aura color, both of the starting tarots would be that primary aura color. But if you choose to select a secondary aura, in my case, I chose Earth. One of those must represent your secondary aura. So let's move on to the deck. There are 3 main restrictions for the deck itself. The deck must contain a minimum of 50 cards. I recommend shooting for that 50 cards exact when you're first starting to make a deck. The second thing is, let me pull them. The cards cannot contain more than 3 copies of any particular card. So that's the exact name of the card. You can have a maximum of 3 in your deck. Also, any of the starting tarot cards that you selected, they cannot be in your deck. You cannot have any additional copies in your deck. It can contain other tarot cards, just not the 2 ones selected for your 2 starting tarots. And that's about it. I would, at this point, like to introduce one of my friends to cover a couple of he's going to dive into a little bit of the math, but give you a sense of how many different types of creatures, equipment, strategy cards should you add into the deck, how many lower end cards, higher end cards should comprise of your deck, so it has a pretty standard play throughout the entire game. So without further ado, let me go grab my friend. Oh, why hello there. My name is 3.1415926 Potatoes, or my friends like to call me Potato Pie for short. So I want to cover, go into a little bit of math. Don't worry, there's no quiz, but I ran a couple of the numbers to make sure there's a good draw throughout the entire game. It can be challenging when first starting to build a deck of knowing how many lower end cards should I have. If you have too many, the late game, you won't have as many of those big hitter cards to play. If the deck comprises of too many higher cost cards, then in the beginning of the game, you might not have any cards to play at all. So what I ended up running is, it's called hypergeometric distribution. There are a couple of tools online that you can run to look at the probability. And so what this does is this determines the likelihood of drawing a particular card from a deck. Don't worry, that's all I'm going to cover for the math, but I just wanted to describe the tool. So if you do want to look it up yourself, you can go find a couple of those websites online. So what I like to do is, let me grab my notes. I typically recommend for a deck that about half of the cards should be creatures. I usually shoot for anywhere between 25 to 38 of my 50 cards to be creatures. And I do want to stress that all the numbers I'm talking about, I ran it for a deck comprising of exactly 50 cards. So if your deck has a lot more than 50, the probability, the likelihood of drawing a certain number of cards will differ from what I'm covering in the video. So for equipment cards, I usually shoot for 3 to 9. Strategy cards around 6 to 12. And then Terra cards, I usually have 3 to 6. I think Terra cards are often overlooked. I would add a couple of Terra cards within the deck itself. Can be very strategic to replace some of your opponent's starting Terra cards. So for the breakdown, the cost breakdown, for the lower cost cards, and when I'm talking about lower cost, I'm talking about 0 to 3 cost cards. I typically like to have, I shoot for about 17, at a minimum of 17 of those lower cost cards in my deck. What that does is, from the calculations, it shows that for the starting hand, on average, I should have 2 lower cost cards within my starting hand, on average. This allows me to be able to play a card from turn 1. I then recommend for the 4 to 5 cost cards, or let's say 4 to 6 cost cards, I typically strive for around 13. And then for those higher end cards, higher cost cards, 7 to 10, I would recommend a minimum of 8. Again, these numbers are, that 8 and those 13 are for trying to guarantee that later in the game, when you can play those higher end cards, that you're more likely to have one of those cards in your hand to be able to play. So I'll go over those numbers real quick again. For the lower cost cards, 0 to 3, I recommend a minimum of 17. For 4 to 6, I recommend about 13 or so. And then for the 7 to 10, the higher end cost cards, around a minimum of 8. If you add those numbers up, they don't total 50. So that's up to you on how you want to build your deck. Some people like to build their decks so it plays a little faster, so add more of those lower cost cards. Vice versa. Some people like to really try to build the deck and play those higher, harder hitting cards, higher cost cards near the end. Add more of those cards. These are just recommendations based off some math I run. So with that being said, I'll turn it back over to 5 Potatoes. Thank you. Where did he go? Well, that was very informative. I do want to stress a couple of extra things. No one went over the math, but it can still be tough to determine where to start for building a deck. So I like to first start by just selecting a caster. I usually look at the casters that I have and try to pick if there's one that speaks to me. That's usually a pretty good starting point. Another good place to start is look through the cards, try to find if there's a card that speaks to you, if there's a combination that you want to try to build a deck around. That's a great way to figure out where to start for creating a deck. Don't forget too that these are all just guidelines. I've made plenty of decks that break all these rules, and also make sure to still have fun. I often add in cards that I just like. For example, every Earth deck that I've built usually contains at least one Humble Double card. There are a lot better cards, but I just enjoy playing with that card, and so I add it into my decks. And also keep in mind that once you complete your build your deck in the beginning, make sure to play it, and remember that it's an iterative process. I've always made changes to my deck, and I continue to make changes to my deck to tweak it and make it run how I want. So I hope you enjoyed these guidelines. Let me know if you used any of these or if they helped you make your first deck, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.